First contact at Helios Station. The massive observation window of Helios Station offered a breathtaking view of Pyrox 4, a churning hellscape of active volcanoes and rivers of molten rock that stretched to every horizon. Chief Science Officer Zixtal pressed all 6 of her cooling appendages against the temperature-regulated crystalline barrier, still struggling to process the message she just received from Central Command. They want to send humans here. She chittered in disbelief, her secondary respiratory chambers fluttering with anxiety. Unprotected, without environmental suits, Station Director Krelvin's crystalline form pulsed with calm, steady light, a gesture meant to soothe his agitated colleague. Not entirely unprotected. They'll be wearing what they call standard heat resistance gear, though I admit their definition of standard seems concerning. The entire situation defied logic. Pyrox 4's surface temperature averaged 1,200 Kelvin, hot enough to melt most metals. The atmosphere was a toxic soup of sulfur compounds and metallic vapors. Even the station's most advanced mining drones rarely lasted more than a few hours in those conditions. And now these humans, these soft, water-based creatures from a temperate world, wanted to walk on its surface. A gentle chime announced the arrival of Dr. Ninthi, the station's xenobiologist. Her translucent tentacles were twisted in what the crew had learned to recognize as her deeply troubled configuration. I've reviewed the human biological data they sent ahead. It's impossible. They're claiming these creatures can function in temperatures that would boil their own bodily fluids. And yet, Krelvin's crystalline surface rippled thoughtfully. Central Command insists they verify these capabilities. The humans apparently have extensive experience with similar conditions on their homeworld. Similar conditions? Zixtal's cooling appendages flared in shock. What kind of death world produced these beings? Their conversation was interrupted by another chime, this one marking an incoming ship. The vessel that appeared in their view was unlike anything they'd seen before. Blocky, utilitarian, with obvious heat shielding, but none of the extensive environmental protection systems they'd expected. The comm system crackled to life. Helios Station. This is the Earth vessel Mauna Loa requesting docking clearance. We've got your new geological survey team aboard. And they're eager to get started. Krelvin moved to the comm panel, his crystalline form still pulsing with that maddeningly calm light. Cleared for docking, Mauna Loa. Though we must insist on reviewing your environmental protection protocols before any surface expeditions can be. A new voice cut in, distinctly human and disturbingly cheerful. Oh, don't worry about that. We brought our own gear. Just need a quick surface conditions update, and we can head down as soon as we dock. These readings remind me of Kilauea during the 25 eruption. Should be perfect conditions for the initial survey. The 3 alien scientists exchanged looks of horror. Perfect conditions. The current surface readings were showing multiple active lava flows and atmospheric toxicity levels that would dissolve their environmental suits in minutes. The docking procedure went smoothly, at least. When the airlock cycled open, 4 humans stepped out, wearing what appeared to be laughably inadequate protective gear. Their suits were little more than thin, reflective coveralls. They carried their helmets casually under their arms, chatting and laughing as if they weren't about to descend into one of the most hostile environments in charted space. The leader stepped forward, a tall human female with dark skin and eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. Dr. Sarah Chen, Earth Geological Survey. Thanks for having us. Hope you don't mind, but we brought some of our own equipment. Standard issue stuff for volcanic work. Behind her, one of her teammates was already unpacking what looked like primitive mechanical devices, the kind of tools that should have melted instantly in Pyrox 4's environment. Dr. Chen, Krelvin began carefully, I'm not sure you understand the conditions you'll be facing. Our most advanced drones. Oh, we reviewed your drone data. Chen's eyes lit up with obvious excitement. Fascinating work, but you're really limiting yourself with the current collection methods. We can get much better samples if we go in person. Speaking of which, she checked a simple wrist-mounted device, These readings suggest we're in a perfect window for surface work. Mind if we start today. The humans were already moving toward the preparation area, discussing sampling techniques and geological formations as casually as if they were planning a picnic. Zixtal's cooling appendages were working overtime. "They're all going to die," she whispered to Nenthi. "We're about to witness the death of 4 beings." 3 hours, Nenthi's tentacles twisted even tighter. "I give them 3 hours before we have to attempt a rescue." Neither of them could have predicted what happened next, the moment when humanity's true nature would begin to reveal itself, and their understanding of what was possible would change forever. The humans didn't just survive. They thrived, and Helios Station would never be the same. The descent. The observation deck of Helios Station had never been so crowded. Every off-duty crew member had gathered to watch what they assumed would be either a miraculous breakthrough in geological research or a spectacular disaster. Dr. Sarah Chen and her team were suiting up in their preparation area, their movements precise and practiced despite the growing tension in the room. Surface temperature holding at 1,247 Kelvin, announced the station's eye. Toxic gas concentrations at lethal levels. Wind speeds approaching 200 kilometers per hour. Conditions classified as extremely hazardous. "Sounds like a lovely spring day," joked Mark Rodriguez, the team's geochemist, as he checked the seals on his remarkably thin protective suit. "Anyone else missing Hawaii?" "I'm more of a Yellowstone girl myself," replied Dr. Emma Hayes, adjusting her sampling equipment. "Though I have to admit, these readings are making me nostalgic for that Iceland expedition last year." Zixtal's cooling appendages twitched violently at their casual banter. She turned to Krelvin, her voice pitched low. "Director, we cannot allow this. It's suicide. Our own mining drones barely last an hour in these conditions." "We've been over this," Chen called out, her keen hearing catching the whispered conversation. "Your drones are amazing pieces of technology, but they're designed around your environmental tolerances. We've been working with active volcanoes for centuries. Trust me, this is what we do." The 4th human, Dr. James Patterson, was already running final checks on their transport pod. "Structures sound. Heat shielding at optimal levels. We're good to go, Sarah." "Excellent." Chen turned to address the gathered alien scientists. "We'll start with a basic survey of the western lava fields. Should take about 6 hours. Don't worry if you lose contact periodically. The mineral content in these flows plays hell with communications." 6 hours. Nenthi's tentacles writhed in distress. Nothing survives down there for 6 hours. But the humans were already boarding their transport pod. The last thing the station crew saw before the airlock sealed was Chen giving them a cheerful thumbs up. The descent began normally enough. The pod's heat shielding held as it pierced the toxic atmosphere, its sensors feeding back a steady stream of data. The aliens watched in horrified fascination as the humans piloted directly toward one of the largest lava flows. Beginning descent to primary sampling site, Chen's voice crackled over the comm. "These formations are incredible. The mineral crystallization patterns suggest." The transmission cut off in a burst of static. "Signal lost," announced the station eye. Atmospheric interference exceeding predicted levels. Minutes stretched into hours. The aliens took shifts watching the monitors, expecting at any moment to detect the emergency beacons that would indicate disaster. But the transport's basic life signs continued to transmit steadily, moving methodically across the surface of their hell planet, as if it were nothing more extraordinary than a walk in a park. 4 hours into the expedition, the first real crisis struck. "Mayday, mayday," Patterson's voice cut through the static. "We've got a situation down here. Ground stability compromised. New fissure opening up directly beneath." The transmission dissolved into static again, but the transport's positioning data told the story. The ground beneath the human team had literally split open, revealing the new lava flow that should have instantly incinerated everything in the area. "Launch rescue drones." Krelvin ordered, his crystalline form pulsing with alarm frequencies. Negative on the rescue drones. Chen's voice suddenly cut back in, surprisingly calm. We're fine. Just had to do some quick footwork. Though I'm afraid we lost the transport. Lost the... How are you still alive? Zixtal demanded. Our sensors show you're in the middle of an active eruption. Oh, we are. Chen replied cheerfully. Had to abandon the transport when the fissure opened up. We're proceeding on foot. The formations here are fascinating. We're seeing completely novel crystal structures in the cooling layers. On foot. Nenthi's tentacles went completely rigid, without your transport's protection. Our suits are holding up fine, Rodriguez cut in. Though Emma's got a small tear in hers. Nothing major. A tear. The alien scientists stared at each other in horror. In these conditions, fats. Just a bit warm, Hayes's voice came through. Nothing worse than that time we had to outrun that pyroclastic flow in Indonesia. Remember that, Sarah? Good times, Chen laughed. Though I did lose my favorite boots. Speaking of which, these readings are incredible. The mineral content here. I've never seen anything like it. This could revolutionize our understanding of planetary formation. The next 2 hours were a torture of intermittent communications, punctuated by casual discussions of geological findings that should have been impossible to obtain. The humans talked about walking across surfaces hot enough to melt steel, as if they were discussing a trip to the market. When they finally returned to the station, their thin suits were scratched, scored, and in Hayes's case, actually torn. But all 4 humans were not just alive. They were exhilarated. Look at these samples, Chen exclaimed, holding up containers of still glowing rock. The crystalline structure is completely unique, and the gas composition readings we got from inside the fissure. Unprecedented. The aliens could only stare as the humans unpacked their equipment, chattering excitedly about their findings and already planning the next expedition. Their suits, which had endured conditions that would destroy the station's best drones, were casually hung up like ordinary work clothes. I don't understand. Zixtal finally managed. By every measure we have, you should be dead. The heat alone. Oh, the heat wasn't so bad. Patterson shrugged. Bit warm, yeah, but nothing compared to Death Valley in summer. Though I have to admit, those toxic gases were interesting. Might need to adjust our filtration systems for tomorrow. Tomorrow. Krelvin's crystalline form flickered in shock. You want to go back. After nearly dying. Nearly dying. Chen looked genuinely puzzled. That was just a minor setback. And we've barely scratched the surface. There's so much more to study down there. Those mineral formations we found. They could be the key to understanding how life evolved in extreme environments. We can't stop now. As the humans continued their enthusiastic discussion of the next day's plans, the alien scientists huddled together, their worldview fundamentally shaken. They walk through hell like it's their backyard, Nenthi whispered. What kind of species are they? The kind, Krelvin replied slowly, his crystalline form pulsing with a new pattern, one that indicated growing respect, and not a small amount of fear. That might just change everything we thought we knew about what's possible. The humans, oblivious to the existential crisis they were causing their hosts, continued unpacking their samples, already planning their next descent into what the aliens considered hell itself. To them, it was just another day at work, another chance to push the boundaries of scientific understanding. And somewhere in the station's database, the definition of extremely hazardous conditions was quietly being updated to include a new note. Warning. Human standards of safety may vary significantly from galactic norms. Understanding the impossible. Dr. Nenthi's laboratory had never been so cluttered. Every available surface was covered with data readouts, biological scans, and environmental simulations. The xenobiologist's tentacles moved frantically between displays, trying to make sense of the information before her. This makes no sense, she muttered, reviewing the latest sensor data from the humans' third expedition. Their internal temperature regulation alone defies every biological principle we know. The humans had been on Helios Station for 2 weeks now, and each day brought new impossibilities. They'd established what they called a base camp on the surface, a simple structure that seemed absurdly inadequate for the environment, yet somehow remained functional. Even more bewildering, they'd started taking their meals there, claiming the view of the lava flow's added atmosphere. A gentle chime announced Zixtal's arrival. The chief science officer's cooling appendages were finally beginning to show signs of wear from constant stress. Please tell me you found some logical explanation for them. Nenthi gestured at her displays with 3 tentacles simultaneously. Their biology is remarkable. Look at this. Their bodies actively maintain internal temperature through a process they call sweating. They expel excess heat by secreting water through their skin. It's primitive, yet incredibly effective. Water. Zixtal's appendages twitched. They use their own bodily fluids as coolant. It gets better. Nenthi brought up another display. Their bones. They're constantly rebuilding themselves, getting stronger in response to stress. And their skin. It's actually adapting to the radiation levels. They call it tanning. A commotion in the corridor interrupted their discussion. Dr. Chen's voice carried clearly through the station's halls, excited as always. The readings from the magma chamber are incredible. The pressure variations suggest there might be deposits off. Sarah. Rodriguez's voice cut in. You've got to see this. The spectrometer's picking up traces of that new element we found yesterday. Much higher concentrations this time. The aliens watched as the human team rushed past the laboratory, barely noticing them in their excitement. They were covered in volcanic dust, their suits showing fresh scorch marks, yet they moved with energetic purpose. Did you see the latest mineral analysis? Nenthi asked quietly, pulling up yet another display. What they're finding down there. It shouldn't be possible to get samples from those conditions, but they're doing it. Every day. The screen showed something that had the potential to revolutionize a dozen industries across the galaxy, if it could be safely extracted. Which, until 2 weeks ago, everyone had assumed was impossible. They don't just survive down there, Zixtal realized, watching the humans through the laboratory window. They're thriving. Look at them. They're stronger now than when they arrived. It was true. The constant exposure to extreme conditions seemed to be improving their performance rather than degrading it. Their movements were more sure, their reactions quicker. They'd learned to predict geological events that the station's best instruments couldn't detect, claiming they could feel it in their bones. Director Krulvin wants to open discussions about a permanent human presence on the station, Zixtal continued. After seeing what they can do, we'd be fools not to. A new alert flashed across the screens. The humans were preparing for another descent. This time, they planned to venture into an area that the station's sensors classified as absolutely lethal. They'd started calling it the really interesting bit. Watch this. Nenthi brought up the live feed from their preparation area. Hayes was explaining something to a group of junior researchers. Her suit casually unzipped despite the proximity to the airlock. The trick isn't fighting the environment, Hayes was saying, sketching diagrams in the air. It's working with it. These conditions seem extreme to you because you're measuring them against your own tolerances. But to us, this is just another day at the office. Earth threw everything this planet has at us, and worse, while we were evolving. We learned to adapt, to thrive in conditions that should kill us. The junior researchers recording appendages were working overtime, trying to capture every word. The humans had become something of a sensation throughout the station, their casual defiance of what everyone else considered absolute physical laws both terrifying and fascinating. Look at their cellular structure, Nenthi highlighted another display. The way they repair radiation damage, their ability to synthesize proteins under extreme stress, even their digestive systems adapting to process food contaminated with volcanic gases. They're not just surviving. They're using the conditions to their advantage. A new alert sounded. The humans were ready to begin their descent. Through the laboratory window, the aliens watched as the team did their final equipment checks, laughing and joking about something called marshmallows that they apparently wanted to try roasting over an active lava flow. They're going to change everything, aren't they? Zixtal asked quietly. They already have, Nenthi replied, her tentacles finally settling into a pattern of acceptance. The real question is, what else can they do? The answer would come sooner than anyone expected, and in a way that would prove humans weren't just physically remarkable. They were capable of something even more impressive, turning certain death into opportunity. In the void beyond the station, magnetic storms were building, charged particles gathering like predators. Soon, they would test not just human endurance, but human ingenuity. And in doing so, they would reveal why these strange, resilient creatures might be the key to unlocking the galaxy's most hostile frontiers. The humans, preparing for their descent, remained blissfully unaware of the approaching storm. They were too busy discussing the most efficient way to collect samples from what they had started calling the really hot spots, areas that registered on the station's instruments simply as LETAL, do not AEPROH. To them, it was just another challenge, another chance to prove that what others called impossible was merely waiting for humanity to show up and rewrite the rules. Crisis point. The magnetic storm hit without warning. One moment, Helios Station was operating normally. The next, alarms blared as radiation levels spiked to unprecedented levels. The station's shields, designed to withstand the harsh conditions around Pyrox 4, began to fail under the onslaught. Main power grid compromised. The station AI announced with eerie calm. Shield failure imminent. Estimated survival time, 17 minutes. Director Krulvin's crystalline form pulsed with emergency frequencies. Begin evacuation procedures. All personnel to escape pods. Wait. Dr. Chen's voice cut through the chaos. She and her team had just returned from their latest surface expedition, their suits still smoking slightly. Those readings. This isn't just a magnetic storm. She rushed to the main console, fingers flying over the controls. Look at these particle patterns. The planet's magnetic field is interacting with the solar wind in a way I've only seen once before, during the Jakarta incident. The what? Zixtal's cooling appendages were working overtime. Major geomagnetic event caused a cascade of volcanic eruptions, but that's not important right now. Chen turned to her team. What's important is that we know how to stop it. Stop it. Nenthi's tentacles twisted in disbelief. This is a planetary scale event. Exactly. Rodriguez was already pulling equipment from their supplies. And the planet itself is the key. Those mineral deposits we found yesterday. They're not just valuable. They're magnetic monopoles. If we can get enough of them to the surface in the right configuration, we could create a magnetic dampening field. Hayes finished, already checking her suit seals. Redirect the worst of the storm. That's insane, Zixtal protested. The surface conditions are even worse than usual. Our instruments show temperature spikes of over 1,500 Kelvin. The atmospheric toxicity is perfect for what we need to do, Patterson interrupted, hefting what looked like primitive drilling equipment. The increased heat will actually help with the mineral extraction. We just need to work fast. The aliens watched in stunned silence as the human team prepared for what seemed like certain death. They moved with practiced efficiency, checking equipment and discussing technical details as if they weren't about to walk into conditions that would vaporize most known materials. 15 minutes until shield failure, the AI reminded them. Plenty of time, Chen grinned, though her eyes were serious. We'll need to set up 3 collection points. The magnetic fields have to be precisely aligned, or this won't work. The transport pods won't function in these conditions, Krelvin warned. Won't need them. Rodriguez was already heading for the airlock. We'll go on foot. Faster that way. On foot. Nenthi's tentacles went rigid. In these conditions, even your suits won't protect you. Then we'll work without them if we have to, Hayes said simply, as if discussing removing a jacket on a warm day. Wouldn't be the first time. Before the aliens could process this latest impossibility, the human team was moving. They split into pairs, each heading for different collection points identified by Chen's rapid calculations. The aliens could only watch through the station's sensors as they descended into what the instruments classified as unsurvivable conditions. The next 12 minutes were a masterclass in human endurance and improvisation. The team moved across the violently active surface with impossible speed and precision. Where even their reinforced suits began to fail, they simply removed pieces that hindered movement, exposing themselves directly to conditions that should have killed them instantly. First monopole array in position, Rodriguez's voice crackled through static. His suit's external sensors had failed, but his vital signs remained strong. Beginning activation sequence. Second array aligned, Hayes reported. The video feed showed her working with bare hands when her suit's gloves melted, her skin reddening but somehow not burning away. Magnetic field stabilizing in this sector. Final array. Chen's voice was strained but determined. Almost. There. With 30 seconds to spare, the last array clicked into place. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The lethal magnetic storm began to dissipate, its energy redirected and dispersed by the precisely placed mineral arrays. When the human team returned to the station, they were singed, exhausted, and triumphant. Parts of their suits had literally melted away, leaving patches of reddened but intact skin exposed. They smelled of sulfur and ozone, and their eyes shone with the peculiar light of people who had just done the impossible and were already thinking about how to do it better next time. That was closer than I'd like, Chen admitted, accepting a container of water from a shocked station crew member. But the data we collected, unprecedented. The way those monopoles responded to the magnetic flux, we could revolutionize planetary defense systems. Zixtal struggled to find words. You walked through conditions that would destroy our best shielding, without protection. And you're talking about data collection. Well, yeah. Rodriguez shrugged, then winced slightly. I mean, when else are you going to get readings like that? Though next time, we should probably bring backup suits. These ones are pretty much done for. Next time. Krelvin's crystalline form flickered in disbelief. You want to do this again? Of course. Chen was already pulling up data displays, her fingers leaving sooty marks on the screens. Now that we know it's possible, think of the applications. We could set up permanent magnetic dampening fields, make the whole planet more accessible for research. The potential here is incredible. The aliens looked at each other, then at these impossible beings who had just casually rewritten the laws of what was survivable, who had walked through hell not just once, but repeatedly, treating conditions that would destroy most known materials as mere inconveniences. And they were smiling, already planning their next expedition, already thinking about how to push even further into what everyone else considered impossible. That was when the aliens truly understood. Humans weren't just adapting to extreme conditions, they were mastering them. And the galaxy would never be quite the same. A new partnership. 3 months after the magnetic storm incident, Helios Station was unrecognizable. What had once been a purely observational outpost had transformed into a thriving research and development center. Human researchers and engineers now worked alongside alien scientists, their different perspectives and capabilities combining to create innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. The station's observation deck, once a place of quiet contemplation, now buzzed with activity. Dr. Chen stood before a holographic display of Pyrox-4's surface, pointing out features to a mixed group of human and alien researchers. The magnetic dampening fields have stabilized these regions. She indicated several glowing areas on the map. We're seeing a 30% reduction in surface temperature and a 40% decrease in toxic gas emissions. More importantly, the mineral deposits are now accessible with standard equipment. Standard human equipment, you mean? Zixtal added, her cooling appendages now adapted to the constant stress of watching humans work. I still can't believe your mining teams consider those conditions moderate. Everything's relative. Rodriguez grinned, entering the room with fresh samples from the surface. His new suit, a collaboration between human and alien engineers, showed signs of recent exposure to extreme conditions, but remained intact. These readings would barely register on Mount Doom back home. Mount Doom, one of the junior alien researchers queried. Sorry, Mount Ngoroo, Hayes corrected, looking up from her analysis station. Active volcano in New Zealand. We like to nickname them after stories. Makes the really nasty ones feel more approachable. Director Krulvin's crystalline form pulsed with what the humans had learned to recognize as amusement. In the months since the crisis, he'd developed a deep appreciation for humanity's peculiar way of treating deadly serious situations with humor. The Galactic Science Council has reviewed our latest reports, he announced. They're struggling to process some of the implications, particularly the footage of your team's emergency maintenance run last week. The one where we had to fix the magnetic array during the solar flare. Patterson asked, absently rubbing the newly healed skin on his arms. That was nothing. Though I have to admit, those new heat-resistant tools your engineers designed made it much easier. Nothing. Nenthi's tentacles waved in exasperation. You walked through liquid rock, without full environmental protection. Only for a few seconds, Chen shrugged. Besides, the mineral content made it less dense than usual lava. More like wading through thick soup. The aliens had stopped trying to argue with human definitions of safe and dangerous. Instead, they'd focused on learning to work with these incredible beings who treated lethal environments as mild inconveniences. The Council has approved the establishment of a permanent joint research facility, Krulvin continued. They're calling it the Extreme Environment Exploration and Development Center. Though I understand the human contingent prefers to call it the hotspot, several humans chorused, laughing. We've already had interest from 15 different worlds, Zixtal added, places we thought were too hostile for any kind of development. If your methods can be adapted, oh, they can be, Chen assured her. We've been studying impossible places since we first crawled out of the oceans. Volcanoes, deep sea vents, radioactive zones, they're all just puzzles waiting to be solved. And now, with your technology and our unique approach, Nenthi's tentacles curled in what humans now recognized as fond exasperation. Is that what we're calling your species' apparent death wish? Not a death wish, Hayes corrected. Just a different perspective. Where you see impossible conditions, we see challenges. Where you see lethal environments, we see opportunities. It's not about being indestructible. It's about understanding that the impossible is usually just the undiscovered. The station shuddered slightly as another geological event rippled across the planet's surface. None of the humans even seemed to notice. They were too busy discussing plans for expanding their research, for pushing further into conditions that the rest of the galaxy had written off as unusable. You know, Krulvin observed, his crystalline form reflecting the glow of the lava flows below, when your team first arrived, we thought you were mad. Or suicidal. Now I understand. You're neither. You're something else entirely. Oh. Chen looked up from her data displays. And what's that? You're human, he said simply. And perhaps that's exactly what the galaxy needed. Beings who look at hell itself and see a place to call home. Outside the station's windows, Pyrox 4 continued its violent geological dance. But now, thanks to human ingenuity and resilience, its once lethal surface was slowly being transformed. Research outposts dotted the landscape, their magnetic shields creating islands of relative stability in the chaos. Human and alien scientists worked side by side, each bringing their unique strengths to the challenge of understanding and harnessing this hostile world. And in orbit, Helios Station had become more than just an observation post. It was a symbol of what could be achieved when the impossible was treated not as a barrier, but as an invitation, when the deadly was seen not as a limit, but as an opportunity. As Chen finished her presentation and prepared for another descent to the surface, she paused to look out at the churning hellscape below. To her alien colleagues, it still looked like certain death. To her, it looked like home. And that, perhaps, was humanity's greatest strength. Not that they could survive the impossible, but that they could make the impossible feel normal. That they could take hell itself and transform it into just another day at the office. The galaxy would never be quite the same. And that was exactly what everyone had been hoping for.